She woke up to the sound of the early morning birds singing outside her small window. The sunlight slipped gently across her room, illuminating the worn but clean furniture she had grown accustomed to. The room was quiet except for the hum of her thoughts and the faint creak of the old wooden floorboards beneath her feet as she moved toward the kitchen. Today was like every other day, yet something inside her felt different. She could not name it, but a sense of anticipation lingered in the air. She began her morning routine, simple and methodical. She brewed a cup of coffee, the aroma filling the small kitchen, and took a moment to breathe it in. It was a ritual she had come to love, a small comfort before the demands of the day began. She poured a bit of milk into her cup, watching it swirl and blend with the dark liquid, and smiled softly to herself. This was her quiet time, a small moment of peace before she faced the world outside. After breakfast, she carefully dressed in her work uniform for the cafe, where she had been employed for several years. The cafe was not fancy, but it was warm, welcoming, and a place where people came for more than just coffee. She always made sure to greet each customer with a genuine smile, taking note of their usual orders and remembering small details about their lives. Over time, she had become more than just an employee. She had become a comforting presence for many who visited regularly. Her walk to the cafe was familiar and soothing. The streets were quiet, lined with small shops and houses, the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew each other. She passed by the corner bakery, catching the scent of freshly baked bread, and smiled at the elderly woman arranging flowers outside her shop. A young child waved at her from the sidewalk, and she waved back, feeling a small warmth spread through her chest. These little interactions, simple as they were, made her mornings feel special. At the cafe, the day began in the usual rhythm. She took orders, prepared drinks, and served food with a gentle efficiency that made her coworkers appreciate her presence. Customers came and went, some in a hurry, others lingering for a moment of conversation. She always took the time to listen, offering a kind word or a friendly smile. Many noticed that her eyes held a quiet intelligence and a subtle depth, as if she carried a world of thoughts and stories inside her. But there was a part of her life that few ever saw. In the quiet moments between serving tables, when the cafe was slow, she would hum softly to herself, letting the melody flow naturally. It was not just singing, it was a way to express feelings she could not put into words. Sometimes she would tap out rhythms on the counter or imagine the notes on a piano she did not yet own. Music had always been her companion, a private escape that gave her strength and comfort. She remembered the small keyboard she had as a child, sitting in the corner of a modest living room, and how she would press the keys softly, creating little tunes that seemed to capture her moods perfectly. Her parents had been supportive but practical, encouraging her to pursue something stable and reliable. Life had a way of steering people towards security, and she had learned to balance her dreams with the need for stability. Yet even as she served coffee and smiled at customers, the music inside her never faded. One quiet afternoon, a young boy entered the cafe with his mother. He had a small notebook in his hand and looked around curiously. As she prepared their drinks, she noticed him scribbling in the pages, his tiny fingers moving quickly across the paper. She hummed softly while working, not expecting him to notice, but he paused and looked up at her. His eyes lit up and he smiled shyly. "Do you always hum like that?" he asked, his voice full of wonder. She laughed softly, a bit embarrassed but touched by his curiosity. "Sometimes," she admitted, "it helps me think and feel happy." The boy nodded seriously. "You should play for everyone. You sound really nice." His words lingered with her long after they left. She could not stop thinking about them. Could it be possible that the melodies she kept to herself were meant for more than just private moments? Could they be shared, bringing joy to others in ways she had never imagined? The thought excited her, but also scared her. She had spent so long hidden behind the safety of routine that the idea of stepping into the spotlight felt both thrilling and terrifying. Days passed. She began to notice small signs everywhere. A customer would compliment her cheerful voice while taking their order. A coworker would hum along quietly when she hummed, as if the sound connected with them in some unspoken way. Even the plants on the windowsill seemed to lean toward her, thriving in the warmth of her presence. It was as if the world was gently nudging her, reminding her that she had something special to offer. One evening, after closing the cafe, she lingered a little longer, wiping down the counters and organizing supplies. The room was quiet now, empty of the chatter and clatter of the day. She leaned against the counter and let herself hum freely, the sound echoing softly against the walls. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine a life where music was not just a secret companion, but a part of who she was in the world. Her imagination carried her to a small stage. Lights shining down, an audience waiting. She could see herself playing a piano, her fingers moving across the keys with ease, the melodies flowing naturally. The applause, the smiles, the quiet tears of someone moved by her music, she could see it all, and it felt real, even if it was only a dream. She realized that her heart had been ready for this moment long before she knew it. The thought of taking a first step was both exhilarating and daunting. She had spent years building a life of stability, finding joy in simple things, and connecting with people in small, meaningful ways. But now, a new path was opening, one that required courage, trust, and the willingness to embrace the unknown. She knew it would not be easy. There would be challenges, fears, and moments of doubt. Yet the music inside her whispered that it was time to try. She decided that she would take a small step first. Nothing grand, nothing public yet. She would practice, experiment, and let her melodies grow stronger. She would learn to trust her voice, her intuition, and the feelings that had guided her through quiet mornings and long evenings. The journey would be slow, but she felt a new energy pulsing within her, a quiet determination that could not be ignored. As she left the cafe that night, the streets were empty, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. Walked home slowly, feeling the cool air on her face and the rhythm of her own heartbeat. Every step seemed to echo with possibility, each breath filled with hope. For the first time in a long while, she felt fully awake, fully alive, and ready to see where this new path could lead. Back in her small room, she sat at the corner where she kept her modest keyboard. She pressed the keys softly, letting the notes drift into the quiet space around her. The music was simple, yet each sound carried the weight of her dreams, her fears, and her unspoken hopes. The melody, imagining the faces of people who might one day hear it, who might feel the emotions she poured into every note. Sleep eventually claimed her, but even in her dreams, the music played on. It was a constant companion, a reminder that her life, though humble and ordinary in appearance, held the seeds of something extraordinary. She did not know exactly what the future would hold, or how far her music would take her, but she felt a quiet certainty that she was ready. For the first time, the melody of her life seemed to be leading her forward. She was listening closely, eager to follow where it would go. Morning came again, and with it, the familiar routines, the quiet streets, and the comforting aroma of coffee. But she walked with a new awareness, a sense of purpose that had not been there before. Each customer, each interaction, each small moment became a part of a larger tapestry, weaving together the life she had lived with the life she was beginning to imagine. She hummed softly as she worked, a gentle reminder to herself that this was only the beginning. And in that simple, unassuming cafe, a quiet transformation had begun. One note at a time, the following week felt different from all the others. She walked to the cafe with the same routine, but her mind buzzed with new possibilities. Every step seemed to carry a quiet excitement, as if the air around her was whispering encouragement. She felt an unfamiliar energy deep inside, a sense that the world was holding something for her that she had not yet seen. The cafe was busy as usual, the clatter of dishes, the low hum of conversations, and the comforting aroma of brewed coffee filled the space. She greeted customers with her usual warmth, taking orders and serving food, yet her mind kept drifting back to the music that had been steadily growing in her heart. She hummed softly while cleaning tables, her voice almost blending with the soft jazz playing in the background. It was in these moments, when the world was focused elsewhere, that she felt her music most alive. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything changed. A visitor entered the cafe, a man with an easy smile and a notebook tucked under his arm. He moved with purpose, glancing around as if searching for something special. He approached the counter where she was wiping a table, and when she looked up, he smiled warmly. "I couldn't help but notice," he began, his voice calm but curious. "I heard you humming while you worked. You have a beautiful voice. Would you ever consider performing at our community talent night?" She blinked, caught off guard by the question. The words hung in the air, heavy and thrilling all at once. Her heart skipped a beat. Perform in front of an audience. She had never thought about it in earnest. Music had always been her private world, a refuge from daily life. But something in his eyes, the genuine interest and encouragement, made her pause and consider. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice soft. "I've never performed for anyone before. I just sing to myself." He nodded. Not in disappointment, but in understanding. That's the best place to start. Music that comes from the heart, untrained but true, is exactly what people need. You'll be surprised at what you can do when you let yourself try. The words settled in her mind. She had spent years imagining what it would be like to share her music, but she had never dared to take the first step. Fear and self-doubt had held her back. Now, standing in the middle of the cafe with the man's encouraging gaze, she felt the stirrings of courage. Her coworkers noticed her distraction, sensing the unusual excitement in her movements. They exchanged curious glances but chose not to interrupt, allowing her the space she needed. As she continued her work, she found herself rehearsing in her mind, imagining the small stage, the lights, and the people waiting to hear her play. Her hands tapped gently on the counter as if keeping time with an invisible piano. That evening, after the cafe closed and the last customer had left, she lingered a little longer, thinking about the invitation. She sat at her small keyboard, pressing keys softly and experimenting with the melodies she had kept to herself for so long. The music felt alive in her hands, full of possibility and emotion. She imagined performing not perfectly, but honestly. And a sense of calm courage washed over her. Over the next few days, she practiced every spare moment. In the quiet mornings before opening the cafe, she pressed keys softly, testing melodies and rhythms. During lunch breaks, she hummed in corners, experimenting with how her voice could rise and fall with the music. Her routine began to shift. The cafe was still her anchor, but music was becoming her guide. She began to see connections she had never noticed before, the way the sound of a coffee grinder could mimic a rhythm, or the laughter of a child matched the lightness of a melody. The world seemed to sing along with her. When the night of the talent event arrived, her nerves were fierce. Her hands trembled slightly as she entered the small community hall, where rows of chairs were arranged and a modest stage awaited. People were beginning to gather, chatting and laughing in anticipation. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that this was a chance to share something she loved. Nothing more and nothing less. As she stepped onto the stage, the lights bright but gentle. She felt the weight of all her years of quiet practice and private humming. The crowd was not intimidating. Instead, it seemed curious, welcoming. She closed her eyes briefly, feeling the vibrations of the floor beneath her, the anticipation in the air, and the music that had always lived inside her. Then she began to play. The first notes were soft, almost tentative, as if testing the space in the audience. But as she continued, the melody grew, filling the room with warmth and emotion. Each note told a story of mornings at the cafe, of dreams held close, of small joys and quiet struggles. The audience listened, captivated, as if the music had reached directly into their hearts. She could see smiles, hear soft gasps, and feel the gentle sway of heads in rhythm. The music was no longer hers alone. It had become a shared experience. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. She felt a rush of relief and joy, a feeling so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. The man who had invited her approached afterward, smiling proudly. "See? I told you," he said simply. "People respond to truth in music. You have something special. Don't hide it." Encouragement and the audience's reaction ignited something new within her. She realized that her music, once a private comfort, could inspire, soothe, and connect with others in ways she had never imagined. The possibilities were now real, tangible, within her reach. In the days that followed, she received unexpected attention. Friends and neighbors complimented her performance, expressing amazement that someone so unassuming could create such beauty. Local social media shared her story, and she began receiving invitations to perform at small gatherings and events. Each invitation was a chance to step further into the world she had long imagined, and each time she accepted, her confidence grew. Yet, this rise did not come without challenges. Balancing her work at the cafe, practice sessions, and new performance commitments was tiring. Some days her body ached, and her voice struggled to find its clarity. Doubts crept in, whispering that perhaps she was not ready for such attention, that she had overestimated her abilities. But each time, she returned to her keyboard or the quiet space of her cafe hums. Grounding herself in the love and joy that music had always brought her, she began to notice how music affected those around her. A young couple, struggling with tension, would pause to listen, their faces softening as her melodies drifted through the air. An elderly man, sitting alone, smiled for the first time in days. Children would clap along, encouraged by the rhythm she shared. The realization that her music had this power filled her with both awe and responsibility. It was not fame she sought, nor applause alone, but the ability to touch lives, even in the smallest ways. Over time, her practice evolved. She experimented with more complex melodies, combining soft piano tones with gentle hums, learning to let her emotions guide the rhythm and pace. She studied small details, like the way a pause could hold a listener's attention, or how a subtle change in pitch could convey a deep feeling. Music was becoming not just a part of her life, but a language she could speak fluently, expressing all the nuances of her heart, even when performing in front of audiences. She remembered the early mornings at the cafe, the quiet hums between serving customers, and the child who had once told her she should play for everyone. Those moments reminded her that the journey had begun long before the stage. In the simple act of sharing herself with the world, one note at a time, as she prepared for her next performance, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The experiences of the past week had taught her that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. Each performance was a step forward, a chance to grow and to share the music that had been waiting patiently within her. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, but she also knew that she was no longer afraid to take the first step. The world was beginning to see the woman who had quietly served coffee with a smile and hummed melodies in hidden corners, and it was ready to hear the music she had always carried in her heart. The weeks following her first public performance were a whirlwind of discovery and excitement. Each day brought new opportunities, new faces, and new challenges. She continued to work at the cafe, where the familiar routine of serving customers grounded her. But outside of work, her life had begun to shift in ways she had never imagined. Invitations to perform at local gatherings, schools, and small events arrived steadily, and with each one, her confidence grew. Her mornings began as usual, with the soft sunlight spilling into her room and the comforting aroma of coffee filling her kitchen. She would sit at her keyboard, fingers tracing familiar keys as she hummed softly, preparing for the day ahead. But unlike before, her practice sessions carried a sense of purpose. Each note was intentional, each melody shaped not just by instinct but by thought and emotion. She experimented with rhythms, explored dynamics, and allowed herself to improvise, discovering depths of creativity she had never tapped before. Her first solo performance after the community talent night was at a small library event. The room was modest, filled with local residents seeking a quiet evening of music and storytelling. She was nervous, her hands trembling slightly as she approached the piano, but the warm smiles of the audience reassured her. She reminded herself that she was not performing to impress, but to share the music that had always lived inside her. The first few notes were tentative, but as she played, the music took on a life of its own. She lost herself in the melodies, her fingers moving with growing confidence and expression. The audience listened in rapt attention, their faces softening, some closing their eyes to savor the sound. Children sat wide-eyed, captivated by the gentle hums intertwined with the piano. Elderly listeners smiled, memories and emotions stirred by the familiar tones. When she finished, the applause was warm and genuine, and she felt a thrill unlike anything she had experienced before. It was not just the recognition, but the connection she felt with each person in the room that made her heart soar. Word began to spread about her performances. People spoke of a woman with a simple presence but extraordinary talent, who could transform ordinary spaces into moments of magic with nothing but a keyboard and her voice. Local journalists wrote short articles, neighbors shared stories online, and her community began to watch eagerly for her next performance. With each opportunity, she discovered new aspects of herself, courage she hadn't known she possessed, a creativity that seemed endless, and an ability to touch hearts without words. But with growth came challenges. She had to balance her cafe work, practice sessions, and performances, and some days were exhausting. There were moments when her voice faltered or her hands grew tired and self-doubt crept in. She worried that she was not good enough, that perhaps the excitement of the first few performances was just luck. Yet each time, she returned to her music, reminded of why she started and how far she had come. She realized that resilience was as important as talent, and persistence could carry her even through moments of uncertainty. One afternoon, a local event organizer approached her with a larger opportunity. A well-known community hall had an opening for her to perform in front of a bigger audience. The thought was thrilling, but intimidating. She had performed for small groups, where faces were friendly and familiar, but this was something different. The hall was grander, and the audience larger. The responsibility of commanding attention, of truly connecting with so many people, weighed heavily on her mind. She decided to prepare carefully. Every evening, after returning from work, she practiced for hours. She explored the nuances of each piece, learning to pace her breathing, control her voice, and express emotion through her fingertips. She imagined the audience in detail, their reactions, their emotions, the way they might respond to subtle shifts in melody. It became a mental rehearsal as much as a physical one, and gradually, the fear began to transform into focused anticipation. The night of the performance arrived. She entered the hall, noting the elegant stage, the soft lighting, and the seats gradually filling with an eager audience. Her heart raced, but she reminded herself of the countless small moments that had led her here, the quiet mornings, the hums at the cafe, the first hesitant notes played for a child's smile. She was ready to share herself, not just her music. And that realization gave her a quiet strength. As she began to play, the initial nerves melted away. Her fingers glided across the keys, and her voice intertwined seamlessly with the piano. The audience was immediately drawn in, absorbed by the melodies that carried both tenderness and intensity. Each note seemed to ripple through the room, touching hearts in ways she could only imagine. She noticed the subtle reactions, a tear on a cheek, a soft nod of appreciation. A child leaning forward in wonder and felt a profound sense of connection. The performance was more than a display of skill. It was an expression of her journey. Every hesitation, every triumph, every quiet morning spent alone practicing had shaped the music she now shared. When she finished, the applause was long and heartfelt. She stood for a moment, absorbing the energy, and felt tears well up in her eyes. It was the kind of validation that went beyond recognition. It was an acknowledgement that she had found her voice. And that voice mattered. Afterward, she was approached by several people who shared how much the music had moved them. Some described feeling inspired to pursue their own hidden talents. Others spoke of memories stirred and emotions healed. She listened quietly, humbled and touched, realizing that the music she once kept to herself had grown into something far greater. It was not about fame or accolades, but about the invisible threads that connected hearts through sound and emotion. In the days that followed, she reflected on her journey. The once private melodies, shared only in the quiet corners of her home and cafe, had become a language that could reach people far beyond her immediate world. She realized that talent was only part of the equation. Courage, persistence, and a willingness to take risks were equally vital. The combination of these qualities had brought her to this point. She felt ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. Her life began to settle into a rhythm of growth. She continued working at the cafe, where she remained a comforting presence. But outside of work, her performances and musical exploration became central. She experimented with new styles, learned to read more complex music, and even began composing original pieces. Each day offered lessons, not just in music, but in patience, empathy, and the delicate art of connecting with others. The experiences of performing for different audiences taught her to observe, adapt, and respond to the emotions around her. Through it all, she remained grounded in the simple joys of life. A warm cup of coffee, a child's laughter, a neighbor's smile, all of these moments reminded her of the world she had come from and the importance of staying true to herself. Her music had given her wings, but it had also taught her to appreciate the earth beneath her feet, the small threads of everyday life that wove the larger tapestry of her journey. One afternoon, while practicing for an upcoming performance at a local school, she paused to reflect on how far she had come. She thought about the initial fear, the hesitation to share her music, and the quiet mornings she had spent alone at her keyboard. Each memory carried a lesson, a reminder of the courage required to step into the unknown. She realized that her story was not just about discovering talent, but about embracing possibility, listening to intuition, and trusting that her voice, quiet, humble, but persistent, could make a difference. She looked around her modest practice space. The keyboard worn but familiar, the notes scattered across the table, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. The journey was far from over, and challenges would continue to appear, but she knew she had the strength to face them. Her music was no longer just a personal escape. It was a bridge, connecting her to the world and allowing her to share the beauty she had carried silently for so long, as she prepared for her next performance. She felt a quiet thrill. The experience had transformed her, teaching her that talent, when paired with dedication and courage, could open doors she had never imagined. Each note she played was a testament to her journey, a celebration of the small beginnings, the moments of doubt, and the perseverance that had brought her here. She knew that she had only just begun to explore the full extent of her potential, and the thought filled her with excitement, hope, and a renewed sense of purpose. With every key she pressed and every melody she sang, she became more certain that her music could reach far beyond her immediate surroundings. It could inspire comfort and connect, offering a sense of understanding and shared emotion. The once quiet woman, who had served coffee with a humble smile and hummed melodies in private, was now standing on the edge of a new chapter, ready to embrace the opportunities and challenges that awaited. The journey of her music had become the journey of her life, and she was eager to see where it would lead next. As her music career began to expand, the excitement of new opportunities was accompanied by challenges she had never faced before. Balancing her work at the cafe, practice sessions, and multiple performances was exhausting. Some days she woke up with a sense of purpose and energy, ready to play and sing. A lot of their days, fatigue and doubt weighed heavily on her. She realized that growth came with its own complexities, and that talent alone would not be enough to navigate this new life. Her mornings still began with quiet reflection, a cup of coffee, and the comforting hum of her keyboard. But now, she often found herself thinking about schedules, audience expectations, and how to maintain her voice. There were moments when she felt the pressure to perform perfectly, to exceed the growing reputation she had gained. It was a strange sensation to feel both excitement and anxiety, knowing that people were counting on her music to touch their hearts. The stakes seemed higher than ever. She had to learn to manage the tension that came with it. One day, a well-known local musician invited her to collaborate on a performance. The opportunity was a dream come true, but it also brought self-doubt. She worried about keeping up with someone experienced, about whether her own style would blend or clash. She practiced obsessively for hours, replaying every note in her mind, perfecting each phrase. Even as she worked, she reminded herself that mistakes were part of growth and that her authenticity was more important than flawless execution. But the anxiety was real, gnawing at the edges of her confidence. When the day of the performance arrived, she entered the hall with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The stage was larger than she had expected, and the audience seemed eager and attentive. As the lights focused on her, she felt a brief wave of fear, but quickly drew on her practice and past experiences. She took a deep breath, letting the music flow from her heart rather than her mind. The first notes were soft, tentative, but gradually they gained strength, confidence, and clarity. The collaboration with the musician was transformative. They discovered a rhythm that complemented both their styles, and the audience responded with warmth and enthusiasm. For the first time, she felt that her music could adapt and grow beyond what she had imagined. The shared experience highlighted the importance of learning, listening, and embracing new perspectives. She realized that even as she faced doubt, collaboration could turn uncertainty into creativity, and challenges into opportunities. Despite these successes, not every day was easy. There were moments of exhaustion when she questioned her choices. One afternoon, after a particularly long day of cafe work and back-to-back practice, she felt the weight of her commitments pressing down. Her hands ached, her voice felt strained, and her mind was clouded with worry. She sat at her keyboard, staring at the keys, and wondered if she could continue to manage the growing demands. Doubts whispered that she might be overextending herself, that perhaps she had bitten off more than she could handle. It was in these moments that she discovered the importance of support. Her friends, colleagues, and the community who had watched her perform began offering encouragement. Simple gestures, a kind word from a coworker, a message from a listener saying her music brightened their day reminded her why she had started. She realized that strength came not only from within, but from the connections she had nurtured. These small acts of kindness helped her regain focus, reminding her that the journey was not hers alone. She also found solace in the quiet moments between performances. Sitting at her keyboard in the evening, she would let her fingers wander across the keys, not thinking about perfection or audience reactions, but simply playing for the love of music. These sessions reconnected her with the pure joy that had inspired her at the beginning. The melodies, once private and personal, were now a lifeline, helping her navigate the pressures of growing expectations and the fatigue that sometimes threatened to overwhelm her. As her schedule became more demanding, she began to pay closer attention to her health. She learned to manage her energy, incorporating rest, nutrition, and mindful breathing into her daily routine. These practices helped her sustain the stamina needed for long performances and rehearsals. She discovered that caring for her body and mind was essential to maintaining the quality and emotional depth of her music. The lessons were subtle but profound. Talent alone could not carry her forward. She needed resilience, balance, and self-awareness. One significant challenge arose when she was invited to perform at a regional event with a larger, more critical audience. The pressure was intense, and she could feel her nerves intensifying in the days leading up to the performance. She questioned whether she was ready for this stage, whether her music would resonate with so many new listeners. But she reminded herself of every small step she had taken: the first hesitant notes at the community talent night, the library performance, and the collaborations that had pushed her boundaries. She realized that these experiences had prepared her for this moment, equipping her with confidence, adaptability, and emotional insight. The night of the regional performance arrived. She stood backstage, listening to the applause for the previous performers, her hands resting lightly on the keyboard. She focused on her breathing, imagining the notes flowing naturally, guiding her fingers and voice. As she stepped onto the stage, the lights brightened, and the audience's anticipation filled the room. The first note was a soft, deliberate touch, followed by a gentle hum. Then the music unfurled, growing richer and more expressive with every passing moment. The performance was a triumph, not because it was flawless, but because it was genuine. Each note carried emotion, telling a story of quiet beginnings, dedication, and courage. The audience responded wholeheartedly, some leaning forward in rapt attention, others closing their eyes to feel the music deeply. When she finished, the applause was sustained and heartfelt, and she felt a surge of pride and relief. She had faced her fears, embraced the challenge, and shared her music authentically. The experience taught her a powerful lesson. Challenges were not obstacles to avoid, but opportunities to grow and discover new strengths. She began to see every difficult day, every moment of doubt, and every demanding performance as a chance to learn, adapt, and deepen her connection with music and her audience. Her confidence grew, not in arrogance, but in the quiet understanding that perseverance, resilience, and authenticity were as vital as talent. In the days that followed, she reflected on her journey. She had started as a woman quietly humming while serving coffee, unsure if her music had any place in the world. Now, she was navigating stages, collaborating with other musicians, and touching the hearts of people she had never met. The lessons she had learned about balance, self-care, and courage became integral parts of her daily life, shaping not just her music, but her sense of self. She also realized the importance of community in her journey. The support of friends, colleagues, mentors, and listeners had helped her overcome self-doubt and sustain her momentum. Each kind word, encouraging smile, and message of appreciation reinforced the idea that music was a shared experience, a way to connect people across boundaries. This awareness deepened her commitment to performing with sincerity, empathy, and openness. Her music continued to evolve, reflecting not only her technical growth, but also the emotional depth she had gained through experiences and challenges. She explored new styles, experimented with original compositions, and allowed herself to take risks on stage. Each performance became a learning opportunity, teaching her to listen, adapt, and respond to the emotions around her. The challenges, once intimidating, now felt like stepping stones, guiding her toward a richer, more fulfilling musical journey. Through it all, she never lost sight of the simple beginnings that had sparked her journey. The quiet mornings, the hums at the cafe, and the encouragement of a child or a coworker remained vivid in her memory. They reminded her that greatness often starts with small, humble steps, and that perseverance, courage, and passion can transform even the simplest moments into extraordinary experiences. She understood now that challenges were part of every journey worth pursuing. The fatigue, doubt, and pressure she faced were not signs of weakness, but markers of growth. Embracing them, learning from them, and moving forward despite them had strengthened her as a musician and as a person. Her life, once predictable and modest, had been transformed by her willingness to step into the unknown, to share her gift, and to trust in her own abilities. Even as she faced new challenges on the horizon, she felt prepared. Each experience had built resilience, each performance had strengthened confidence, and each obstacle had taught valuable lessons. Her music was no longer just a private joy. It was a living expression of her journey, a bridge connecting her heart to the hearts of countless listeners. And as she continued to navigate the balance between ambition and humility, challenge and triumph, she knew that the most profound discoveries were still ahead, waiting for her to reach, play, and share. The day of her biggest performance yet arrived with a mixture of excitement, anticipation, and a hint of nervousness. She woke early, as usual, the sunlight spilling into her room, but this morning felt different. There was an energy in the air, an electric sense that something significant was about to unfold. She prepared herself with care, sipping her morning coffee and letting the warmth of the liquid steady her thoughts. Her fingers brushed over her keyboard, feeling the familiar weight and texture of the keys, a comforting reminder of how far she had come. The venue was a large concert hall, a step up from any stage she had played on before. Seats stretched far into the distance, and the gentle buzz of audience anticipation filled the space. Backstage, she took a moment to close her eyes and breathe deeply, recalling every small performance that had led her here. She remembered the quiet mornings at the cafe, the first hesitant notes played for a child, and the supportive words of strangers and friends who had encouraged her to step into the light. Each memory fueled her courage, reminding her that this moment was the result of years of quiet dedication and belief in herself. As she walked onto the stage, the lights cast a warm glow, and she could see hundreds of faces looking up at her. The audience was eager, and their energy was palpable. She sat at the piano and allowed herself a moment to absorb the atmosphere. Feeling the vibration of the floor beneath her and the collective expectation in the air, then she began to play. The first notes were soft, deliberate, and filled with intention. They flowed effortlessly, carrying the stories of her journey, the moments of doubt, the bursts of inspiration, and the quiet perseverance that had shaped her. The music gradually grew in complexity, each phrase building on the last. Her fingers moved with confidence, guided by the emotions that had fueled her passion for years. As she played, she felt the room respond, the audience leaning in, captivated by the melodies that seemed to speak directly to them. Children's eyes widened, adults nodded subtly, and some closed their eyes to fully immerse themselves in the sound. It was a shared experience, a connection that transcended words and filled the space with warmth and understanding. She incorporated subtle dynamics, gentle crescendos, and moments of silence that allowed the music to breathe. Each note carried meaning, a reflection of her journey from humble beginnings to this moment of recognition. She allowed herself to improvise, trusting her instincts and the flow of her emotions. The melodies were no longer just notes on a page. They were extensions of herself, living expressions of her story, her struggles, and her triumphs as the performance continued. She noticed subtle gestures, from the audience's soft smiles, tears glistening in eyes, and the quiet sway of heads in rhythm. It struck her deeply that music had the power to touch lives in profound ways, to create shared moments of emotion and understanding. She realized that every hour of practice, every moment of doubt, and every step she had taken toward embracing her talent had led to this connection. It was the culmination of patience, persistence, and the courage to follow her passion when she reached the final notes. The room was filled with a reverent silence for a brief moment before the applause erupted. The sound was overwhelming, heartfelt, and sustaining. She rose from her seat, bowing deeply to the audience, feeling a surge of pride and gratitude. The applause continued, with people standing to show their appreciation. She could see smiles, tears, and expressions of pure admiration. And in that moment, she understood the full impact of her journey. Her music had reached the hearts of many, leaving an indelible mark. Backstage, she was greeted with congratulations and warm words from fellow performers, organizers, and audience members. Each interaction reminded her that her success was not measured solely by skill, but by her ability to connect with others through authenticity and emotion. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her music could inspire comfort and bring joy to people from all walks of life. In the days following the performance, her life continued to evolve. Invitations to perform at larger venues, festivals, and community events flowed steadily. Media outlets began to feature her story, highlighting her journey from a quiet cafe worker to a celebrated musician who had touched countless lives. Despite the growing recognition, she remained grounded, remembering the small steps, the private practice sessions, and the humble beginnings that had shaped her. Her dedication to authenticity and connection guided every decision. Ensuring that her music remained true to her heart, she also became a mentor to others. Sharing her experiences with those who had hidden talents or dreams they were hesitant to pursue, she encouraged them to take small steps, to embrace their passions with courage, and to trust that their voices and skills could make a difference. The joy of seeing others discover their abilities mirrored her own journey, reinforcing the idea that talent and perseverance, when nurtured with care and authenticity, could transform lives. Throughout this time, she continued to nurture her personal life with the same attention and care she had always shown. She spent time with friends and family, engaged with her community, and maintained the routines that had grounded her. She understood that success was not just about performances and accolades, but about balance, connection, and the ability to sustain joy in everyday life. Her music remained central, but it was complemented by the relationships and experiences that enriched her existence. She also explored new musical horizons, experimenting with different genres, composing original pieces, and collaborating with a variety of musicians. Each new endeavor brought learning and growth, challenging her to expand her skills. While remaining true to the emotional depth and authenticity that defined her performances, she approached every opportunity with curiosity and dedication. Understanding that mastery was a lifelong journey rather than a fixed destination, one evening, Reflecting on her path, she realized how much she had changed. The timid, private woman who had hummed in quiet corners of a cafe had transformed into a confident, expressive musician capable of inspiring large audiences. Yet despite the external recognition, her greatest satisfaction remained in the simple joy of creating music, in the quiet moments at her keyboard, and in the connections she forged through her art. She understood that the journey itself, the perseverance, courage, and growth was as meaningful as the destination.